everybody. Welcome to In This Corner, the podcast. A buck 70, boxing's biggest names, boxing's biggest stories, boxing's biggest fights, greatest memories and moments. We break it down, dissect it all, and we do it with the boxing author, writer, CompuBox counter, historian Lee Groves. How you doing, Lee?
Doing well. And from what you told me, you're not exactly doing that well yourself.
No, I think everything caught up with me, but we're going to take off next week. I'm pretty sure. So I wanted to fight through this one because there's so much to talk about. Obviously, what took place a couple of nights ago here in Las Vegas, Terence Crawford and his victory over Canelo Alvarez, the undercard, in a way had a fight. But also, we're going to end things on a rather somber note. We'll try to make as positive of it as we can. The passing of a guy I considered a friend, so many did, Ricky Hatton, the hitman, who was found dead about 24 to 48 hours ago, something like that. Don't even know at this point if the cause of death has been announced, but we'll pay tribute to a guy who was everything. When I talk about fighters being the most common and uncommon of all athletes, I don't think anybody exemplified that better than Ricky Hatton. So a lot to do. I've been under the weather, so you've been working overtime to try to get us together. So I'll let you lead us through this. Go ahead.
Of course, one of the main thrusts of this show is what happened last Saturday night, Terence Crawford's historic victory over Canelo Alvarez. I want to ask you, what are your overall impressions? What did your eye see? How did you score the fight? What did Bud do right? What did Canelo do wrong?
I think in terms of the score, we can get that out of the way. I could give. I think I gave Canelo 3 or 4 rounds, maybe something like that. If I was being harsh, I could have given him only 2 rounds because you know how much emphasis I put on ring generalship, and you and I had a great conversation about that earlier. I think Steve Weisfeld, who was on the show not so long ago, he got it right. I think he had it 116 to 112.
As I
But
did.
it just was the better fighter, the fighter with more ways to win, found a few of those ways. He's a better athlete, a better fighter, and I think he used those skills to upend anything that Canelo had as an advantage, or what some thought would be an advantage, meaning his power and the fact that he was, at a buck 68 for a long, long time. Once the fight started, and I was paying close attention to a few things that you wouldn't hear much on the broadcast, unless Andre Ward might have said it. And that was the feet of Crawford was just splendid. He always was in the proper foot position to throw his shots and get out of harm's way and nullify Canelo's shots. I also noticed even before the fight started, the big gloves that I'm not saying they weighed anymore, but the way the shape of the gloves that Crawford had on, extra padding to pick off some of those shots. Canelo landed some really good right hands, but most of them were partially deflected, just enough to where you never saw Bud buzzed at all. I think my main thing I said last week when we ended the breakdown show, which was a great show. You and everybody on did a great job. I think I said if Crawford stays upright, he wins. He stayed upright, and he won, and he primarily won with ring generalship. Just a better fighter.
And one of the ways that you could describe Bud Crawford as a better fighter is the history that he created with this win. He became the sixth man in history to win titles in 5 weight classes, and the other 5 who did it, Sugar Ray Leonard, Thomas Hearns, Oscar De La Hoya, Floyd Mayweather, and Manny Pacquiao, they're all in the Hall of Fame. And another piece of history, he became the second man ever to pull off the 135 168 double. And the man who did it first was South Africa's Dingaan Tobela, who won the WBA lightweight championship. And then he went up to 168 in the year 2000 and he won
I
that.
hope you put a picture right now of Dingbad because I feel like a dingbat not knowing anything about that guy. I consider myself a historian. And I think so many of us, had forgotten or didn't even know about him. Is that fair to say?
It is pretty fair to say. I will give Mark Ortega credit. When I visited the Hall of Fame recently and brought up that stat, he knew it. He knew it. So, good on him. But here's some more history. Um, Terence Crawford became the first man in the four belt era, and I emphasize four belt era, to become an undisputed a champion in three weight classes. Henry Armstrong was an undisputed champion in three weight classes. So,
And let's be honest, though, I love Bud and picked him to win, and he's been my number one for 10 years. This is not a Henry Armstrong moment, though. It's not. It's
no.
not. You can't compare to what Armstrong did when there was basically, 8 divisions or whatever, and you had all the best fighting the best all the time, not taking anything away from Crawford, who I think belongs in the conversation with Henry Armstrong and some of the guys you just mentioned, but not for what he did, not for those accomplishments. It's just for how he's going to end up in history, in my opinion. But continue.
And me being a CompuBox guy, it's natural for me to go in and dig into the stats and tell you what happened. Now there are two sets of numbers that are going around, the ones that were used on the Netflix broadcast and then the real ones at CompuBox. I am a little biased in that respect. And so I will give you what our numbers indicate. Now, as we predicted, this was not a bomb throwing war. Bud averaged 44 and a half punches thrown per round, while Canelo averaged 28.2. Did a really good job of limiting Canelo's offense. And he outlanded Alvarez 115 to 99 overall because he outjabbed him 45 to 16. Now Canelo did lead 83 to 70 in power connects, and while he was more accurate than Bud overall and in jabs, Bud landed a higher percentage of his power shots, 34% to 32. And that's important because in order for Crawford to win rounds, he would have to hit Canelo solidly and to catch the eye of the judges to give him rounds. And they certainly did. And finally, in the round by round breakdown of total connects, the fighters tied 5, 5, and 2, and the fighters were separated by 3 or fewer total connects in 6 of the 12 rounds. But in those 6 rounds, in which one guy had a bigger advantage over the other, Bud was ahead in 4 of those rounds. So he won more rounds comprehensively. So in looking at the numbers, yes, cosmetically they were close, but this was one of those rare fights that was determined mostly by ring generalship than by clean punches and effective aggression. And that's a very hard thing to pull off. And Bud did it. And for that, he deserves a huge amount of credit.
And there was never really a point during the fight where you felt that Canelo was coming on. So many people thought Bud would do well early. Canelo would turn the tide in the middle and later rounds, and his power would be too much, and he would probably knock Crawford down or hurt him and win a decision. That didn't even come close to happening.
Right.
He never hurt Crawford. In fact, Crawford buzzed him more than he did Crawford. Not that he hurt Canelo, but he buzzed him, and he mainly buzzed him psychologically because
Yeah.
Canelo didn't know what the hell to do. From round 9, he had no idea. He was clueless and shoeless. He'd had no idea of what to do. The distance, leverage, and timing, and conversations that you and I have all the time that I wish were open to the public. I told you about that jab. You know how I've always said by far the most important punch in boxing is the jab. There are
Yes.
people now on these dumbass commentators now that have come into the fray that say that's, they've never fought. They don't anyway. It's by far, and if you notice, every single time start of the round, Crawford would use that right jab off the southpaw style. Sometimes it was pick, peck, poke, poke. Sometimes it was to get him in position to throw the stabbing straight left. He probed with it. He shot it out there. He varied it. And it really, honestly, to be honest, it was the key punch, the jab. And it's
Yeah.
just like when I would tell people about Manny. When you jab at Manny, he doesn't do anything. When you jab at Canelo, he doesn't do a damn thing. So if you jab and then continue and get yourself in position, you're going to win that combination battle. And again, Canelo kept trying. He didn't give up. But for anybody who thinks the fight was difficult to score, it wasn't. It was a one-sided affair. So.
Well, I scored the fight 116 to 112
Yeah.
for Bud Crawford, 8 rounds to 4. Same as Steve Weisfeld, who is considered the top judge in the world and who was on our show not too long ago to explain the precepts of what he used to judge fights. Um, you know, and another big question that has emerged from all of this is where does this victory, how does this victory impact Bud's standing in boxing history? Where is he going to land? And how will this loss affect Canelo's place in history, especially when it comes to his place among the best Mexican boxers? I think I said on the show, and if not on the show during our phone conversations, that if Bud wins this fight, he can comfortably be in the top 30 all time. And of course, you have to take into effect the deeds of the men who are mostly in the top 10. No modern fighter is probably going to break into the top 10. But if you can be in the top 30 or the top 25, that's a really big deal for a modern fighter. Bud is undefeated. He's 42-0. And if this is his last fight, as some may speculate, this would be one of the greatest swan songs in boxing history. And as for Canelo, I think that this confirms what a lot of people already have suspected. He's not going to be Julio Cesar Chavez, the number one Mexican fighter of all time. I think the best that he could hope for is to be in the lower half of the top 10. You got guys like Ricardo Lopez, Eric Morales, Marco
Salvador
Angulo.
Sanchez.
Yeah, Salvador Sanchez. There's just a wealth of greatness in Mexico, and Canelo is one of the most accomplished. He does have a great resume, but you can pick at his record. It may not be as good as some people say. They say that he should have lost to Erislandy Lara. We both said that he lost the first two fights to Gennady Golovkin, so on and so forth. And another big debate, historical debate, has begun on social media in the wake of Bud's victory. How would he fare against the best version of Floyd Mayweather? What say you about
I
that?
think I've already said it, didn't I? A year or so ago, maybe. And I'm going to point this out. And anybody, well, I mean, they could try to go check the numbers, if you will. I was probably the first well-known boxing journalist broadcaster that said Floyd Mayweather was number one. I remember when I first said it, people didn't agree with me, and of course we would see what would happen. I definitely tabbed Bud number one. I'm sure you'll back me up on this before anybody, certainly more loudly, because it was over a decade ago. And
Mhm.
it's simply because my eyes tell me this guy can do stuff that others can't do. The real greats aren't just one way traffic. The reason Mike Tyson will never be my number one heavyweight is he only had one way to win. He had one way to win, right? Larry Holmes could win in different ways. Ali could win in different ways. Joe
Mhm.
Louis could win in different ways. Lennox Lewis, and I could go on.
Mhm.
Obviously, Usyk now could win.
Right.
There's only one way Tyson could win. Canelo's pretty much one way, although I'll give Canelo credit. He can box a little bit. But Crawford just has it all. He's that rare athlete. He's like one of those wide receivers who can take you deep. He can catch the ball over the middle in traffic because he's tough. He
Hmm.
could make the quick moves, and it just he could do anything. And that's what he can do inside the squared circle. He can do everything. So I think for me, he beats Floyd Mayweather. The best Crawford beats the best Mayweather because he can do, and there are things that Floyd does a little better than him, but that shoulder roll is not going to work against another guy who can do it as well as you, but he's stronger than you, and who knows how to get in and around it because he implements it himself. Also, the southpaw style, the fact that if he needed to, and he didn't do it the other night, he could switch. And he's got dog in him. Floyd was a tough guy. There's no doubt. Anybody who said he's not, they never. Floyd was tough, but he's not as tough, and he's not as mean, and he's not a bad mother. Watch your mouth, as Crawford is. I think Crawford is just a today athlete with the mindset of an old school, champion like an Archie Moore or a Jersey Joe Walcott, or even more. He's Ezzard Charles, man,
Mm.
all wrapped up into one. And for that, I think he beats Floyd. And I think at the end of the day, I would rank him ahead. But that is not for me. I don't care what others are doing because I don't pay attention to them. I'm not taking anything away from Floyd. I'm just praising Terence Bud Crawford.
I agree with you. Bud's a little taller, maybe.
Yeah.
He's definitely a little longer. He can switch hit. And as far as brain power is concerned, he can definitely compete with Floyd, if not exceed him. Who knows? I think styles make fights, and Bud Crawford's style would be quite the puzzle for Floyd Mayweather to solve. And he also hits harder. He has healthy hands. Floyd Mayweather did not have healthy hands. That might come into play as well.
And at the
And
end of the day, Floyd Lee thought defense to set up offense, where Crawford still is offense. And yes, I'm going to be responsible, but I'm going to take some chances and I'm going to whoop your ass. So I would love to see CompuBox do a real comparison. I'm guessing Floyd would be more accurate. I don't know who's the busier of the two. You could tell me, but it at the end of the day, it's just like in football. The reason my 72 Dolphins were so great is because they had great offense, they had great defense, they were great mentally, they were tough, they didn't make mistakes, and that's why they're the only right now unbeaten team in the history of the National Football League. So it's a good debate, and for me, it's Crawford.
one final question before we close this segment out. Where does each man go from here? What do you say?
Well, if I and I like both guys, and I would tell them both to sail off into the sunset. I don't think they'll do that. For Canelo, he's got such a great fan base. Speaking of fan bases, we'll be talking about one later
Yeah.
on in the show, the Ricky Hatton. But I think maybe he'll have a swan song in Mexico or something, a tribute. As for Crawford, he's going to be pulled in a lot of different directions. I'll just tell you what I don't want to see, and then we'll go to the next segment. I don't want to see him fight Bivol. I think it's a horrible fight for him. He's way too small for Benavidez, and I'm not going to debate people. If they can't tell that, they're stupid. So I don't want those fights. There's nothing else for Crawford to accomplish. Man, get the hell out of Dodge. But that's what I would see. What they do is one thing. By the way, one of the things we spoke about was that it wouldn't be probably a rewind type of fight, one that you would watch over and over and over again. And for me, it's not. Is it a fight that you really want to see over and over again? Or and I, by the way, I don't want to see a rematch. But what say you?
I agree. And I think we said that again, either on the phone or on the
Yeah,
show. This was not going to be a barn burner. This was going to be an edge of your seat fight to see What happens if Canelo hits him to the body, or if he hits him on the jaw? How well is he going to take? How well does Crawford assimilate to the weight? He answered all of the questions that pushed me to pick Canelo to win the fight. He answered it in the most positive way possible. Yes, he is big enough. Yes, he is strong enough. Yes, he can box well enough. Yes, he can fight well at 168 pounds. Yes, he did everything right as far as preparing his body and his mind and his spirit for that fight. And now he is being seen as an almost godlike figure in boxing. And what do they say? You want to step off the stage at the right time, and right now, his esteem among the fans and the press and guys like us, it's at its peak. It's right there where it was after he beat Errol Spence. What better time for would it be for him to step off the stage than now?
Speaking of fights, though, that you do want to watch over and over again, we're not going to have time to really talk about it. We've done it before, but I just want to do a quick mention before we go to break.
Mm-hmm.
44 years ago today was a fight that I still watch all the time, and that is Sugar Ray Leonard, Thomas the Hitman Hearns won here in Las Vegas,
Mm-hmm.
Caesar's Palace. What a fight it was. And you're looking at a little collage I put together. If we would have had time and we didn't have all the circumstances, but I think we've done that before. I was lucky enough, blessed enough to be able to sit down with both guys and talk about that fight. It was one of the really gems that I have in my content collection at In This Corner with the television show. So 44 years ago today, they put on a fight that we always want to watch over and over again. By the way, just like one of my favorite movies I watch over and over again, and I'm going to watch it tonight, is The Sting, in honor of, in fact, we'll put a picture up here right now of collage of the great Robert Redford. He certainly inspired little Smitty with some swag and style. So we lose Robert Redford. May he rest in peace. We'll be back.
I got two options. Option one, I can accept defeat. Option two, I can get up. I can get tougher. I can get faster. I can get stronger. And then I go get mine. I made my choice. Have you made yours?
Back in this corner, the podcast with the sagacious, perspicacious, and very sapient Lee Groves. What do we got next?
Well, we're going to go over the undercard of Canelo and Crawford. And one of the great things about last week's preview show was that we featured several people who were directly involved in that show. First of all, we had two trainers who worked the card in Tom Yankello and Abel Sanchez. We had a referee who officiated two of the fights on the show, Ivan Ditchko, Jermaine Franklin, and Callum Walsh, Fernando Vargas Jr., and Harvey Dock. And we had one of the Spanish language commentators in Raul Marquez. So we covered this fight from almost every conceivable angle, and I doubt that any other podcast was nearly as comprehensive as ours was. Now, as for the undercard, officially speaking, Ivan Ditchko lost a unanimous decision to Jermaine Franklin, and while it was an awful fight to watch, the scoring was off base. Um, you know, the bright spot was Tom Yankello. He was telling his man all of the right things to do. He was trying to get his horse to run. The horse wouldn't run. I thought that Ditchko did just enough to win, but all three judges saw it for Franklin. I think the 97-92 card was way off base. That meant that he thought Franklin won 7 of the 10 rounds. I didn't see that. Did you?
No, I thought Ditchko won the fight. He didn't look good. Tommy sounded good, but he can't fight for him. So as we move on.
The three prospects on the card, Sultan Al Mohammed, who is one of Abel Sanchez's guys. Marco Verde and Rito Tsutsumi, they all won. And Steven Nelson, who was long associated with Bud Crawford's team, was surprisingly knocked out in the first round by Raiko Santana. And Brandon Adams, he repeated his previous win over Sergey Boachuk, this time by unanimous decision.
I did a few of Santana's fights right around the time I was doing Lester Martinez's fights, who I know we're going to talk about. He's a decent fighter, so that result doesn't shock me.
Now, it was quite the performance. And the rest of Netflix's main show, Abel Sanchez's other fighter, Muhammad Alakel, won a 10-round decision over Travis Crawford. I don't think he's related to Terence, but, that's neither here nor there. Callum Walsh won a 10-round decision against Fernando Vargas Jr. And in one of the year's best slugfests, Christian Mbili and Lester Martinez fought to a 10-round draw. Smitty, you've done several of Martinez's fights. What are your thoughts about Lester?
Yeah, I thought that one could have gone either way.
Yeah.
I thought I probably would have given it to Lester because the subtleties he was doing a little bit more, where with Mbili, he's just one-way traffic, and that one-way traffic is a lot of fun to watch, but it's going to get him in trouble. His days are numbered. That was clearly the fight of the night. The Callum Walsh thing with Vargas should have never been the co-main event. Callum Walsh is Dana's White's project. I think he's just a glorified club fighter. I don't see him his posture's all wrong, his balance is all wrong, and I think he'll be a decent fighter, but I think they thought he'd be the second coming of Canelo. He might be the second coming of Canelo's brother, but not Canelo.
One of his 7 brothers who fought professionally, it seems. And the fact that Muhammad Alakel was on the main card was Turk Al-Ashik's project. He's fought on a lot of Saudi undercards or whatever. So politics was all over this card as well. But one fighter that we know is immensely talented, and that's Naoya Inoue. And on the Sunday, well, in the U.S. it's Sunday morning, Sunday night in Japan, Naoya Inoue defended his undisputed 122-pound championship against one of his mandatory challengers, Muradjan Akhmadaliev. And going in, Akhmadaliev, he was a former unified champion at the weight. He was seen as a challenge. Akhmadaliev said he had to sue in order to get the fight to even happen. But once they got into the ring, it was pretty comprehensive, the dominance that Naoya Inoue showed. There were 2 things that were different about this fight. First, this was the first time that Inoue completed the 12-round distance since his first fight against Nonito in 2019. And second, he used his boxing skills to keep Akhmadaliev in his back pocket the entire fight. Many say that Inoue is not as scientific or as Crawford or Usyk, but here he worked behind his jab. He used his mobility to keep the fight at his preferred distance. He used his hand speed to pile up points and not to gun for the knockout. I think part of his motivation is that he has a fight already scheduled against David Picasso at the end of this year, and he didn't want to have any cuts to deal with. And if he beats Picasso, then the plan is to have him fight Junto Nakatani at the Tokyo Dome sometime next year. So he fought the way that he needed to fight. He retained his championship. Any thoughts?
No, just more impressed with him going the distance and the way he fought from what I saw than all the scintillating knockouts that we've come to be used to with the monster. He was a more subtle monster. Maybe he was more like Dracula than Frankenstein or whatever, but he looked good. And, I look forward to that Nakatani fight. Want to quickly go back before we go to the break and then do what we're going to do next.
Mm-hmm.
The Netflix thing, it seemed like the streaming and everything held up.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it shouldn't have with what I heard. The broadcast sucked.
Mm-hmm.
Andre Ward did a pretty good job. Kriegel did okay. And I will say, so that Onik guy, the blow by blow guy from UFC, really didn't do. He actually did an okay job. I didn't like the striking and the level
Yes.
change bullshit, UFC bullshit. But he did a nice job. He didn't do a bad job. He did traffic well. Um, the rest of it, I don't even want to mention the names because not that I worry because none of them can whoop me. So, but it was garbage. It was too much of a shill fest and too much emphasis on the promoters and what have you. And the fight card, the fight. It's not Ali Frazier. Nobody. It's not going to go down in history. Maybe in social media history, but there was nothing. You had two great fighters and all of that, but this thing of don't even put it. It's not even anything near Ali Frazier or all kinds of other fights that I could bring up. And the card wasn't either. And I just thought the announcers did a lousy job, with the exceptions of the ones that I brought up. I love to hear Andre because he actually, I think, mentioned the feet and all the stuff. And Kriegel tried to do some of that stuff, but the rest was weak. And, if we're going to have all these great fighters, maybe it's time they look to up the broadcast. I think one recommendation I would give, I'm sure they're not going to listen to me, would be to get rid of all the broadcasters and just have a few. Have like three men like we used to do. So there's not all this garbage from people that should be broadcasting TMZ or should be broadcasting,
Other things.
some kind of a show about, actors and actresses. What do you call those shows? The ones like
Entertainment.
Entertainment Tonight type stuff. This is boxing,
Yeah.
and there's an edge we have to this, and that's why I love so much the Tim Ryan and the Gil Clancy's and some of the other ones, and even people I've been able to work with, like Al Bernstein and some of the others. And so
Mm.
that I don't know if you want to comment because some of the guys too. I tried to leave their names out, but I think everybody can figure out what I'm talking about. Do you have any comments on what you saw with the broadcast?
One aspect is that the pacing was awful.
Yeah.
In fact, I had to miss watching the main event live because it was almost 1 in the morning. They had a concert going on. I figured, I don't know how long this concert was going to go on. And the fight was probably going to go the distance. And I had to get up at 6:30 in the morning to do the Inoue Akhmadaliev count for CompuBox. And I wanted to refresh. I wanted to
Yeah.
be well rested. I wanted to be sharp. So I just went to bed before the main event. I did the count the following morning and I stayed off social media. I didn't know anything about the result of the fight. And thank God Corey Erdman did not spoil the result during his broadcast of Inoue Akhmadaliev. So after that, I watched the fight not knowing anything and I watch it as if it were live, and there you go. But one other thing, with Crawford and Inoue fighting in such close proximity, and with Usyk being part of the top three in boxing, just like tennis had Djokovic and Nadal and Federer, they had their big three. Boxing has its big three. Now that they've all fought fairly recently, what's the pecking order?
Um, with what Crawford did, he now slightly goes ahead of Usyk, who's 1A,
Mhm.
1B. And in a ways a distant third from those guys, but he's right there, and really the pecking order, the thing is we do have from a guy that's really old school. We do have some great fighters out there. We've got Bivol, we've got
Mhm.
Benavidez, we've got Beterbiev,
Yeah.
we've got the little guy,
We
Bam.
got
We've got
Bam
Bam.
Rodriguez. We have
Yeah,
Shakur.
Shakur. We've got some really great fighters out there that are still fighting. So that's kind of cool. Crawford won. Usyk 2, Inoue 3. We're gonna take a little break and come back, and we're gonna try to keep it as positive as we can. the passing of Ricky Hatton, and where Ricky will be remembered in the pantheon of fighters, namely from the UK, but also what a fan base. There's only one Ricky Hatton. We'll be back.
I got two options. Option one, I can accept defeat. Option two, I can get up. I can get tougher. I can get faster. I can get stronger. And then I go get mine. I made my choice. Have you made yours?
Just a great example of how beloved Ricky Hatton was and is and will always be. I've kind of never seen anything like it. I was fortunate enough to get to know the guy. I know you're going to lead me into some of this, but waking up, I was, happy that my breakdown of Crawford and Canelo turned out to be accurate, and we did a great job with the show. And then I wake up, and as soon as I saw his picture, I was crushed. I mean, it took all the wind out of my pugilistic sails. And as I'll let you lead us into this.
You had a very close relationship with Ricky Hatton. You spent personal time with him, and you also spent professional time. You interviewed Ricky Hatton, and on your TV show, you had him demonstrate some of the techniques that made him such a successful fighter. Can you tell me some of the memories that you had in both of those realms, personal and professional?
Yeah. When I first met Ricky, forgot exactly when it was, but he, like Floyd and like Manny and a couple of others, he opened up his camp for me when he came down here. He trained at Tony Rila's gym for a while, and he let me, carte blanche into that. But when we actually did the show with him, it was at Wayne McCulloch's house. Sit-down interview in Wayne's living room, and then we went out to Wayne's little ring. I knew I was in trouble when I saw how small that ring was, and I'm getting in there with the hitman. And what I was so impressed with is, even though Ricky will never be remembered as a Floyd Mayweather or even a Bud Crawford, scientifically, he was scientific. Maybe he didn't show it, couldn't necessarily do it, but he knew it. Sometimes you can't do it, but you know it. And he was, and during this little clip I'm going to show you, we're going to show you folks, is he makes the comment, when he had me getting set to explain something, he said, my elbows were winging out, and he makes the comment you'll hear about most fighters would have had their elbows in, and I did my Johnny Carson quick back. I said, that's why I had a limited career. But I think in interviewing Ricky, then other times, and even we had him on the podcast, I know we're going to show some of that, he was really smart. Man, he knew his boxing. And I always thought, and I know he did commentary, but he would have been, if he had just stuck to commentary, because he's funny, he knows the sport, he's that rare blend, fun to listen to. Take a look at Ricky Hatton and Smitty in this corner in-ring demonstration. Here's a quick clip.
A lot of fighters do, they just put their heads on each other and they just wail away. If you notice, when I fight, I like to, put a little feeling shots out there and then change the angle and then find the pit of the stomach. Obviously most fighters will keep their elbows in, and I can just...
I didn't, that's why I had a short career.
Just set them up with a few little shots, a few little touching feeling shots around the head, and then sweep round, to to get in between the elbows and get the pit of the stomach.
And there really is an art to that. People don't understand it. They think it's just in there, but you know exactly what you're doing, and sometimes you're setting up the next punch with a maneuver.
Yeah, and like most people, they'll go in there with the clinches, and 9 times out of 10, you'll know if some people, you know, they step to the side, that means they're going to mutually break away. You know, but I don't. You know, I just like to sometimes step to the side and then slip one in when they least expect it. You know, that's what most people do. But
you're setting up another shot.
Yeah, I'm setting up another shot. You know, you change the angle. You know, because most people, they'll be tired in, looking. The minute they look up, you know, and you're round here, then you're round here. If you notice, I'm never really stood in front of my opponent too long.
It makes me, as sad as I am, it makes me smile. I remember that part we were head to head and going over the inside technique and stuff. I'll let you move forward.
You know, we had the good fortune last year. We had Ricky on our show, and we got to talk to him about his career and his life. And during the course of the show, we talked about his fan base. And you, at the time, and in this clip that we're going to show you right now, you actually compared the intensity of his fan base to the fan base of another very popular figure today. Take a listen.
You mentioned your fan base. I was thinking last night, just thinking about all the fighters that I've covered, going all the way back to my relationship with Muhammad Ali when I was a little boy. Ali later on had fanfare, but nothing like you. Chavez had some of it. De La Hoya some of it. There's been a few, Canelo in recent times, Manny Pacquiao, but nothing quite like there's only one Ricky Hatton. In fact, I'm going to make a comparison that if there's any young girls watching, it's like the Rickies were like the Swifties of today. I mean, your thing was like a rock concert. I was there, ringside for all your fights here in Las Vegas. Amazing. You come over here and you're fan. I think that has to be something. I know you've won titles. Now you're going in the Hall of Fame, but that fan base, Ricky, that's special.
Well, I think that was my greatest experience. I had my fights with Floyd and fights with Manny and Costa Zoo and Castillo and people like that, which were brilliant. But I think those are just specific wins. If you ask me what my best ever achievement was my fan base. It has to be. I mean, I grew up with my heroes. My heroes were fighters from the UK, like Nigel Benn and Frank Bruno, Barry McGuigan and people like that. And they're still my heroes to this day. But, so to have a fan base that ended up being, that emulated my heroes' fan base, you know what I mean? How can that not be? And it was like a rock concert. When the Blue Moon come on, it got everyone going. And on the back row, I'd have my band with the drums on, with the war cry, and and that's what it was. You didn't go for Ricky Hatton. Ricky Hatton's fights wasn't just the 12 3-minute rounds. It was the whole weekend, from the weigh-in or from the press conference to the weigh-in to the fight till the day after, and then everyone went home on Monday feeling a little bit worse for wear.
The Swifties.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. But, I'm being serious that I've never quite seen a fan base quite like Ricky Hatton's. I mean, 25,000 or more of them came over when he fought Floyd and Manny. And I was able, a couple of times when I was trying to leave at the end of the night for those fights, his fans mobbed me and I couldn't even get out of there. And I certainly had a hangover the next day. I was also fortunate enough to hang out with Ricky a few times after fights, and I had a hangover after that as well. But on the serious side of all of this, historically, where do you rank his fan base?
I remember you asked me that question. You asked me to come up with examples of those who were as passionate and as devoted as Ricky's. And two of them immediately came to mind. One is Manny Pacquiao, and the other is Barry McGuigan. And that's because these fan bases and the men that they supported share so many similarities. Now, think about it. The fan bases of these three men were very, very vocal in their support. We heard the Wonderland chant for Ricky at the top of the segment, and I recall the Here We Go sing along that was often done during McGuigan's fights. Um, all three fan bases were willing to travel thousands of miles to see their man in action. And they loved their fighter not just because they were tremendously accomplished and talented athletes, but also because the people felt that Barry, Manny, and Ricky was one of them, a working class hero who lived what they lived, felt what they felt, and did what they wished they could do.
Yeah.
Um, Better yet, they represented their nation so very well by remaining humble and personable and approachable. Um, Turning the focus solely to Ricky, he spent many days hanging out at the pub with his fans, drinking beer and playing darts and just having a good time with the people. There weren't any walls with Ricky, and he didn't put on any airs. And his fans really appreciated that. You knew him very well, Smitty, and it was through you that I got to meet him, albeit for just an hour or so. Turns out it was the only time I ever got to talk with him at any length. He was a terrific guest on our show. He answered every question honestly, because how else would he answer them? Say what you want about athletes and how they deal with their public, but in terms of his relationship with the people, there indeed was only one Ricky Hatton.
And comedic stuff aside, just even the things that he did for people. For example, if a kid was being bullied and Ricky found out about it, he'd call the kid or talk to the parents and then the kid or the kids. There were stories of him taking the time to mail memorabilia to a fan who might have lost somebody in the family. He was always there up until the end. He was always there for everybody. And we don't know the cause of death at this moment, but sometimes I feel like a guy like that just uses everything he has up. Ricky gave it all in the ring. He gave it all outside the ring. He gave it all when he partied. And I think they're just how much light is left, how much of the candle, and that candle obviously burned out. Again, we don't know exactly what happened, but I also feel like Ricky's safest place, we've said this about other fighters like Tyson, and I think his safest place was in the ring or in that bar or with those fans or in Canastota, but not when he was alone. When he was alone, those demons, if this happened, get in there. And when you're not helping somebody else, he doesn't know how to help himself. And I again, all I can say is he was a wonderful dude. Always treated me fantastic when he was inducted into the International Boxing Hall of Fame. And last year, we ended up at the airport together, and I told him about wanting to do a one-man show, and he said that he would help me out in the UK. And can you imagine Smitty and Hatton and Smitty, and we joked about it. And I thought I had hoped, because he also said that he really wanted to come back to Canastota. It got into his blood, I think, a little bit. But, of course, at least he'll always be in Canastota in memorial and, inducted and everything like that. But he just epitomized to me that line that I overuse. Fighters are the most common and uncommon of all athletes, and he was a masterclass in that.
He certainly was. And one of the aspects of his personality that made him so endearing was his sense of humor. And his humor was self-deprecating a lot of the times. And during our show, I asked him about the Ricky Hatton suit. Everybody made fun of him for blowing up in weight between fights, and then he'd have to work so hard to get back down to weight. The following clip that you're going to see, we discuss the genesis of the Ricky Hatton suit and all that came with it. So let's listen to him talk about it. Well, you made reference to the process of putting on a lot of weight between fights and then sweating it off again. Um, and you had good humor about it. You even came up with the Ricky Hatton suit.
Yeah.
Who came up with that idea?
That was my idea, to be honest with you. When I got beat by Floyd and I got knocked out, I found it very hard to come to terms with. As you can imagine, it was my first ever defeat as a professional, first time I'd been knocked out, and it was very hard for me to know. I felt so embarrassed. I couldn't walk down the street in my hometown, you know what I mean? I felt embarrassed, and there was obviously no reason to be, because I mean, it's Floyd Mayweather. But, I went over there thinking was going to win, and I didn't, so I was very, very down and depressed, and I put a load of weight on. And when people were saying to me, "Are you going to make a comeback, Ricky? Are you going to give it another go?" I mean, they'd already made up their own minds before they asked me, because the size of me, I was the size of a house. You know what I mean? And they put it in the paper on one day. I think we were seeing the last of Ricky Hatton. They put a picture of me in the paper with a pint of Guinness and with a burger or with something like that. And there's the one thing I was very, very down at. I was thinking about packing it in, but then when I saw that article, I thought to myself, no, come on, you've got something to prove here, because everyone thinks, oh look, you've had one feat. The minute you've lost, I'm chucking the towel in. That's me done, and that's not what champions do, Ricky. And the one that they've called you out said you're not going to fight again because I'm too fat. Not just because I got beat by Floyd, because I'm too fat. No, we'll have that. So if I wore it for the Lascano fight at Man City, and I walked in, I mean, as if I wasn't under enough pressure of just having my first defeat, my first knockout, I walked out to 55,000 fans with a fat suit on. So, I mean, people can say, well, fair play to him. He say, well, he's got some balls. I'll give him that. But I also wore it in for the Leonard-Hearns fight in Las Vegas as well. If you remember yeah. And I don't know what the American fight fans made of it. To be honest with you, they looked at them, they're clapping and looking in the crowd, and they're looking at me as if to go, "Is this fella all there?"
But he didn't shy away from the tough stuff either. You ask him about his struggles with mental health, and here's what he had to say. We talk about your relatability. You've had a lot of dysfunction even since boxing, but you managed to land on your feet. You got your lad Campbell fighting, and I know you've been in some reality shows, but for your fans all over the world, how is Ricky Hatton right now?
Well, I've never been as better, to be honest with you. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I'd love to be able to turn the clock back, like I think every champion would say. I'd love to be going to Vegas and having 40,000 fans singing "There's only one Ricky Hatton." I'd love to be hearing them words and the new welterweight champion of the world. But, in reality, that's not going to happen now. And I wish I could turn the clock back. But, I mean, that separate, I've never been as better now. I mean, I nearly took my life several times, a few years ago when I was going through my bad patch. I fell out with Billy Graham. I fell out with my mum and dad. I had to retire from boxing. I fell out with my relationship. And this was all in the same short space of time period. And I thought to myself, I don't care if I live or die here. I've worked so hard, and everyone that I loved, I don't get time to celebrate my career with now, because I fell out with them all. But, I've made up now with everyone. And to be honest with you, and if I had have took my life, I wouldn't have seen Campbell go professional. I wouldn't have seen me two girls growing up into the ladies. I'm a granddad now, granddad hitman. I've got a granddaughter, Lila. She's 5 years of age. I'm training fighters now. I'm an ambassador for mental health. Look at so much good things that I would have lost out on. So, and the main thing is I went and spoke to someone, got out of my chest, kept myself busy, and I've never looked back since. Of course, I'd like to be lifting world titles, but no, I am in the best place I have been in for a good long time.
His place in boxing history, especially when you're talking about the UK and British boxing and what have you. But first off, his career, where do you rank him? And talk about his accomplishments inside the squared circle that led him to the International Boxing Hall of Fame, being inducted in 2024.
When you're talking about fighters from the UK, there have been others that have accomplished more. Jimmy Wilde from was in my top 10 all-time pound for pound list. While another Welshman we had on our show, Joe Calzaghe, retired undefeated, and he enjoyed a title reign at 168 of more than 10 years. That's something that has been rarely accomplished in boxing history. But Ricky Hatton achieved enough during his career to be inducted into the International Boxing Hall of Fame. And one reason for that is his popularity. To me, Ricky's legend is cut from a similar cloth to that of Arturo Gatti, Ray Boom Boom Mancini, Rocky Graziano, and Tony DeMarco, fighters who made the fans feel something when they fought. We admire guys like Bud Crawford and Alexander Usyk and Shakur Stevenson and Naoya Inoue and Bam Rodriguez for their physical and technical skills. But guys like Hatton create a deep personal imprint in us. And to me, he is a fame fighter in that he made a giant mark in the hearts of his fans. Now, as far as his resume is concerned, his record is 45-3 with 32 knockouts. It's a really good record. Two of his three losses came against all-time greats in Mayweather and Pacquiao, and there's no shame in that. He was a unified champion at 140, and he had another reign at 147. He was Ring Magazine's 2005 Fighter of the Year, the first British fighter ever to win that honor since its inception in 1928. His victory over Kostya Tszyu that year was one of the most joyful nights in British boxing history because of the man he was to his people, and because he defeated a surefire future Hall of Famer in Kostya Tszyu. That ended up being Kostya Tszyu's final fight. He has a lot to be proud of. He really is. And
I think he also had victories over Jose Luis Castillo.
yeah,
And he ran Paulie Malignaggi right out of the ring,
he did.
in a fight that I predicted he would stop Paulie, who was a good boxer at that time. Yeah, Ricky could fight, and I think he was always fighting. Unfortunately, I think he was even fighting after his career, his own self, and I think that that's why he was going to do this comeback. I don't know whether it was going to be an exhibition or a real fight. I forgot.
Right.
But he was going to fight again, and that might have been an indicator. That might have been an indicator that he needed something, because I always sit there and smile when I see him, like me in the gym, hitting the heavy bag with his sauna suit on, and and I know that really helped him a lot because it even helps me with my issues. There's nothing like that heavy bag to calm you down, but it's just such a shock because he just lived so large. Not a big guy, but boy, was he bigger than life in person. I am just so happy, when at a time where I'm having my own issues with the sport, when I think about him and meeting him and sitting down and interviewing him, I was really honest with him. I remember telling him, you've got to, and I remember telling him when we paused and weren't taping, Ricky, take care of yourself. You can't keep ballooning up and gaining all that weight, because then you have to, force yourself to lose the weight, and that takes away from your game plan. And he said, Schmitty, I know how to lose that weight and cut that. I said, yeah, but it's going to catch up with you. It's going to catch up with you. It caught up to Duran a few times, and, and he wasn't the fighter Duran was. And I warned him, and he agreed. And it was just who he was. He's, I don't think he ever met a Guinness he turned down unless he was in, training for the fight. And by the way, I do want to say, when he trained, man, I was there sometimes here in man, he trained like a monk when he trained. So he was serious when he was serious, and when he wasn't serious, he was fun to watch, and he will be missed. But just to get the answer out of you, is his fan base the best ever?
I think you could make a very strong case that it is. Just the passion. You hear the Wonderland song sung for many fighters these days, but the first time I heard it was for Ricky Hatton, and the fans would sing it over and over and over again. Even during the undercard fights,
Yeah.
even in the pubs in Las Vegas, I'm sure they were chanting it and singing it. Whenever I hear the Wonderland song, it is Ricky Hatton's song.
Yeah.
He was the one that made that song,
Blue
and that's
Moon,
the
and
power of who he was.
Blue Moon, and there's only one Ricky Hatton, and so yeah, it's I can't even imagine. It is going to be one hell of a funeral for him. Man, Manchester is just going to be completely shut down, and there'll be a lot of liquid, a lot of Guinness, and a lot of tears
Yeah.
for Ricky the Hitman Hatton. And unfortunately, I've been doing, it seems like, too many of these where I end the show by going to the way I always would end my television show, where I would ask the fighter, how do you want to be remembered as a fighter? How do you want to be remembered as a man? And we'll get you out of here with there's only one Ricky Hatton.
When all is said and done, how does Ricky Hatton want to be remembered as a fighter and as a man?
Well, I'd like to be remembered. People will make their own minds up, who they, how good they think Ricky Hatton actually was. But I'd like to think, Ricky Hatton was a guy that fought the best that was out there. He took on all comers, never shied away from a challenge. Was a wonderful boxer. Was hugely exciting, had a lot of talent as well. And inside and outside of the ring, he never had a bad word to say for anyone. He entertained everyone inside and outside of the ring. A down-to-earth guy, and one of boxing's nice guys, and hopefully one of the best fighters that Britain's had.
Ricky, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for joining us on In This Corner, and after the fight, we'll share a Guinness.
We certainly will. Thank you very much.